Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of India's fight for freedom. And it's a journey that doesn't start with a bang, but with a question, an idea that just grew and grew until it moved millions. So, when you think about India's independence struggle, I bet an image like this pops into your head, right? This is the Quit India movement, a moment of intense, widespread confrontation. For a lot of people, this feels like the big, dramatic finale of the whole story.
But here's the thing, that wasn't the beginning at all. So the real question is, how did we get here? How did this scattered feeling of discontent morph into one of the largest mass movements the world has ever seen? So let's go back. Let's trace the journey of an idea, the very idea of India itself, right from the very start.
All right, so our story kicks off in the late 1800s, and all across the subcontinent, this really fundamental question started bubbling up in people's minds. What is this country, and who is it actually for?
And the answer that came back? It was simple, but for the time, it was absolutely radical. India belonged to the people of India. All of them. Didn't matter what class, color, caste, creed, language, or gender you were. And that powerful idea that all the country's resources, its entire system, should be for its own people, that was the spark. That was the beginning of Indian nationalism.
So these early political groups, they started to rally around this one key idea: sovereignty. The idea that the Indian people should be sovereign, that they should be the ones calling the shots, making their own decisions about their own country without any outside interference. This was huge. This was basically the birth of a modern political consciousness.
Now, this new awareness didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It was fueled by a real, growing frustration with British rule. And a bunch of repressive laws in the 1870s and 80s, well, they really threw that injustice into sharp focus. You had the Arms Act, which stopped Indians from owning weapons. Then the Vernacular Press Act, which could shut down any newspaper that was critical of the government. And then the Ilbert Bill controversy. That was a big one. It was an attempt at legal equality, but it got shot down after white residents opposed it. It just laid the racial bias bare for everyone to see.
So you've got all this discontent simmering. How does it get organized? Well, that brings us to the first real phase of the movement. In 1885, the Indian National Congress was formed, and this kicked off what's often called the moderate phase. Think cautious, methodical steps.
Now, the leaders of this era, guys like Dadabhai Naoroji here, were often these highly educated professionals. His book, Poverty and Un-British Rule in India, was this brilliant, scathing critique of the economics of British rule. But the core belief of these moderates was, hey, we can appeal to the British sense of justice and fair play. We can reason with them to bring about change.
And their method, well, that's what really defined them. They weren't out on the streets calling for revolution, not yet. Their strategy was all about working within the system. They demanded a bigger voice in government. They pushed for the big civil service exams to be held in India, not just way over in London. And they used articles, speeches, and lots of petitions to try and make the government aware of what Indians were feeling. But by the 1890s, this approach, it was starting to wear a little thin. A new generation of leaders was getting really impatient with what they called the politics of prayers. They were done asking politely. A much more assertive voice was starting to rise up. And you can really see this shift in these two key figures. On the left, you've got Naoroji, the face of that careful, negotiating moderate path. And on the right, that's Bal Gangadhar Tilak. He championed a much more radical approach, along with other leaders like Bipin Chandra Pal and Lala Lajpat Rai. The difference between these two groups? It was absolutely fundamental. See, the moderates wanted to reform the system from the inside, but the radicals, they argued that Indians had to rely on their own strength, not on the good graces of the British. They were all about mass mobilization, boycotts, and they demanded something new, Swaraj, which means complete self-rule. And if you want to capture this new, defiant spirit in one line, look no further than Tilak's electrifying slogan, "Freedom is my birthright and I shall have it." That is a complete 180 from the politics of petitions. This wasn't a request, it was a declaration. So what was the spark that lit the fuse? What pushed this radical thinking into the mainstream? It was the partition of Bengal in 1905. Now, the British said it was just for administrative convenience, to make things easier to govern. But pretty much everyone saw the real motive. It was an attempt to split the influential Bengali community and weaken the whole nationalist movement. Well, that move, it backfired. Big time. It made people furious, not just in Bengal, but all across India. And it sparked this massive movement called the Swadeshi movement, a powerful call for self-reliance and the boycott of all British goods and institutions.
Okay, so after 1919, the game completely changes. The whole struggle gets transformed once again. The nationalist movement, which had mostly been a thing for the educated elite, was about to become a true movement of the masses. And that was all thanks to the arrival of one man, Mahatma Gandhi. So, Gandhi gets to India in 1915. He's already had huge success leading nonviolent campaigns in South Africa, and he brought with him this powerful new method, satyagraha, which is all about nonviolent resistance. But here's the crucial part. He spent his first year just traveling the country. He went out and listened to ordinary people, to peasants, to laborers, and he connected with them in a way no leader had ever done before. And all that listening, all that traveling, it laid the groundwork for his first massive all-India campaign, the non-cooperation movement. The call was simple: oppose British rule by refusing to cooperate. And the response was just overwhelming. You had students leaving government schools, lawyers giving up their jobs, and people lighting these huge public bonfires of foreign cloth. The goal for everyone? Swaraj. And this is where things get really fascinating. You see how the movement starts to evolve. It wasn't just some top-down command. Ordinary people all over India took Gandhi's core message of nonviolent resistance and they connected it directly to their own local fights, making this whole struggle for freedom something deeply personal.
Take Kheda in Gujarat. The Patidar peasants there, they organized these nonviolent campaigns against the crazy high land taxes the British were demanding. So you see, the national call was being applied to a very real local problem. It was a movement bubbling up from the ground.
And this was happening all over the place. Over in Andhra Pradesh, you had tribal and poor peasant communities staging what they called forest satyagrahas. They were protesting these colonial laws that were cutting off their access to the forests, which was basically their livelihood. Again, they took that big idea of resistance and aimed it right at the problems that were hitting them hardest. Then you go up to Assam. Tea garden laborers, they started walking off the British-owned plantations, demanding better pay. And what were they shouting? Gandhi Maharaj Ki Jai! Victory to Gandhi the Great King! His name just became this incredibly powerful symbol of hope. I mean, some people even started substituting his name for the god Krishna's in their traditional songs. That's how much he meant to them.
And this popular print here really shows you how so many ordinary people saw him. To millions, Gandhi wasn't just a political leader. He was seen as a kind of messiah. Someone who could finally help them overcome all their poverty and injustice. You see how this image shows him as this divine charioteer guiding all the other nationalist leaders in the great battle against the British? It's really powerful stuff. So when you look at the whole thing, the journey from quiet petitions to massive protests, it shows you that the story of a nation isn't just written by a few famous leaders. It's written by millions of everyday people who decide, together, to shape their own destiny. This incredible transformation from an elite debate into a powerful mass movement is what laid the foundation for modern India. And it leaves us with a big question to think about. What does it really take for an idea to move an entire people?